Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight for this Public Safety Town Hall. I'm Councilmember Luedtke. This is District 7, but with me tonight I have Commander Dave Smith from our 4th District and Chair Katz of our Public Safety Committee. First, we're going to have an update from Commander Smith, and he's going to talk to you about the 4th District and trends that we're seeing here and what the work they're doing.
Thank you, Councilwoman Luedtke, and I appreciate everyone that took the time to join us here today. I really enjoy these kind of conversations because they allow us to get some direct feedback from the community, and that's really extremely important to us as we kind of shape our strategies, knowing what the needs are of the community. So I want to take just a moment. I'm going to try to cover a decent amount of material in a short amount of time. My name is Captain David Smith. I'm the commander of the 4th District, for anyone that doesn't know who I am. I've been blessed with this assignment. I have been a police officer here in Montgomery County. This is going to be my 21st year. I've been fortunate to have assignments all over the department. I started off in the Germantown District for 5 years, and I worked as a patrol officer there and in the Silver Spring District and on a variety of specialized teams. I worked on the Central Business District team in the Silver Spring District and on the District Community Action team there. I worked in our Special Operations Division, and I was fortunate enough to be promoted to the rank of sergeant. I spent 3 years of time in the Wheaton District working in the downtown area, which we call our Lincoln sector. And then I was promoted to lieutenant. I worked as a lieutenant back in Silver Spring. I also managed our personnel division when I got promoted to captain, and then I was selected to be the District 4 commander. So it's been a great experience for me so far. I've been here since October. Let me slide to my next slide here. So first slide here, for anyone that doesn't know, these are our facilities. 2300 Randolph Road is our 4th District station. It is now, I believe, the oldest police facility that we have here in the county.
We hear you.
But it's got a lot of history there. Need a little duct tape from time to time, but we enjoy the space there certainly. And to the picture to the right, that is our Noah A. Leota police satellite facility. And we were really privileged working with the Albany Chamber of Commerce here last month. We had an event to formally dedicate that space to Officer Leota. Officer Leota in 2015 was killed in the line of duty while he was trying to effect DUI enforcement. His loss was tremendous for our department, but his legacy has lived on, and we've been fortunate to work with the Chamber of Commerce to be able to honor him. So that's our substation right here in Albany. It's one of the only actual substations we have here in the county, and it's great to have our officers that work in the Albany community really embedded in the community like that with the substation we have there. So a little bit about District 4. So there is one commander, which is me, and there are 3 deputy commanders, Lieutenant Warren Jensen, Lieutenant Doug Cobb, and Lieutenant Robert Sheehan. Lieutenant Warren Jensen is the deputy commander in charge of the Albany sector here, and we'll share some information at the end as well for those officers if you need to get in contact of any. We have approximately 130 officers assigned to the 4th District. We are extremely geographically diverse. You go from our downtown area, which is basically urban policing in the Wheaton Central Business District, to more residential as you go north to the Albany community here. We have a population density that is the most dense population in the entire county as far as our police districts are concerned here. So our calls for service here, as a result of that, we're the 2nd busiest district on calls for service, second to Silver Spring, so our officers are not ever bored. But we enjoy the tempo, we enjoy the community, we enjoy the diversity of the community here. I think this is probably one of the most diverse communities that we have here in our agency. Our district has traditional patrol and specialized capabilities. We have a Central Business District team which does patrol on bicycles and also has a heavy focus in our downtown area. We have a district community action team, and that's a team that we utilize. It's uniformed patrol officers, but when we have a big problem-oriented policing project or we need to get in the community and really address a problem that's more moderate and long-term, we're able to use that team to get into a neighborhood, interact with the community, use different enforcement strategies, work with other units to address that problem. So that they've been tremendously effective for us. We also have a unit called our Special Assignment Team, and they use some non-traditional methods of patrol that really is able, they help us to enhance our investigations and really do surveillance in a way that we can identify crime as it occurs. We also have a community operations section that's got our traffic unit under it. That's got our community services officers, and that's also got a patrol investigations unit. So that's all housed within the 4th District there. So for our district goals, we want to keep it simple but convey a strong message there. One of the primary goals that we have in the 4th District is implementing problem-oriented policing strategies. And what that means to me is it's just really taking a look at the problem, making sure that we understand the problem first, and how we understand those problems is getting community input, looking at data that we can collect to really see what the problem is. Not only the problem that we can see, but the problem that we can't see, and trying to identify the root cause. And then applying resources to that, and those resources can't only be law enforcement resources, they have to be resources from the community, they have to be resources within our broad county government. We have a number of tremendous programs that exist outside of law enforcement, so communicating those and bringing those to bear to holistically solve the problem. That's really what we like to do. Talked about community. We want to maintain and enhance those relationships. The community trust is the most important thing that we have and that we have to build and maintain. So that's extremely important to us. We want to work in partnership to improve community safety, and also a big priority for us is recruiting our future workforce, which is something that's a major focus for us currently. So with that, just want to transition into a little bit of crime data, and what I wanted to do is just try to use some crime maps just to kind of take a lot of data and convey it in a very simple way. So this is what we're looking at from 2022, January 1, year to date in 2023. And the first category I want to touch on is our aggravated assaults. And as you see here in the heat map, this just kind of gives you a little bit of idea, with the red being the most dense, the yellow being a moderate impact, and then down to the light green being less so, where we're seeing some concentrations of activity. And so here you see down at the bottom of the map, that is our Lincoln sector. That's our downtown Wheaton area. You see some impact there, and you see the Lincoln 1 also. And then the King 1, that's going to be our Aspen Hill area, a little bit less so. So transitioning over to our auto theft, similar, really interestingly so, similar map there, where that's where we're seeing the concentration of problems for our auto theft issues. A couple other categories that I want to talk about is burglary. That's another major offense here. You see a little bit more disbursement there. Again, our downtown area, which is our most populated area, is experiencing a heavier amount there. We also see some moderate activity as you get out to our district border. That border on the left-hand side is going to be our Rockville border there. So as we get down Randolph Road, that's where we're seeing some impacts as well. In the Olney community here, which is up north, you'll notice in the, we call that our John sector, our John 1 and our John 2. Fortunately, this has been an area that has traditionally had a low impact on crime, which is actually a really good for us. We have some strong community up here, a sense of community, and we just traditionally have not had some of the same issues that we've had in other areas. Moving on to theft from auto. Again, similar impacts there. Our Aspen Hill area, we saw some significant issues with theft from auto, and in a moment I'll talk about kind of why that was and what the impact was on that and what we're doing about it, more importantly. And then for our robberies last, that's the last category I chose to put up here. Also, again, impact in our downtown area as well, more significantly. So looking at some of the main issues that we've had and trying to apply some problem-oriented policing strategies to it, the first one I want to touch on is in our Aspen Hill area here. And in that location here, we had several community meetings at the beginning of the year and late last year in the Aspen Hill area, where we were really getting feedback from the community and some frustration on theft from autos that they were experiencing. And theft from autos and auto theft is something that's been up regionally and nationally. It's a persistent problem, but it's one that we are very committed to working in partnership with the community to solve. One of the things, and I'll just make a pitch here again, and I try to do it at every meeting that I have as far as our theft from auto. I know it seems very simple, but please lock your doors. Please re-verify that they're locked. When we have looked at the criminals that are engaging in this activity, what we usually see is just the path of least resistance. We'll see people going down a row of cars, trying door handles, and the one that's unlocked is generally the one that they're going to target. It's just the path of least resistance. So if we can all make that concerted effort to lock our cars, double check those things, I know that that'll help reduce the problem. But when we were looking at the issues of auto theft and theft from auto, we held community meetings to make sure that we got the feedback with the community of where the problems were happening. And then we applied a long-term strategy to try to resolve those issues or help mitigate those. So we used our district community action team, and we used our special assignment team, and we worked in partnership with our auto crime enforcement section, which is a team that's dedicated to resolving auto theft and doing those type of investigations. We use technology to try to help identify stolen vehicles. We were able to bring a mobile license plate reader into the district and put that at strategic points where we could identify vehicle license plates that were stolen. When we take a report for a stolen vehicle, one of the first things the officer is going to do is enter that vehicle registration plate into a system called the National Crime Index, and that's going to let any officer with a database run that computer and do a query and understand that that vehicle is stolen. The officers doing that manually can only run a certain amount of vehicles, but those license plate readers can take a very voluminous amount of information and really help us to identify where those stolen vehicles are. The other thing that we did is we worked in partnership with the state's attorney's office to identify repeat offenders and make sure that those offenders that we identify are getting the attention that they need through the criminal justice system. The state's attorney has been a tremendous partner in that. The other thing that we did, we worked with our crime analysts to identify where these things were occurring. We established an overtime detail overnight. So what we would do is we would have our district community action team, our patrol officers, and our special assignment officers work in the target area during the daytime, and then we would have officers come in a high visibility fashion in the overnight hours to really kind of maintain that visible deterrent overnight and try to reduce that. During that time period, we were able to, between the 2 months that we were looking at, we identified and recovered 45 stolen vehicles. And we worked with our state's attorney to make sure those prosecutions were robust. One interesting note when I was looking at the data from this, of those 45 vehicles that we recovered and arrests we made as a result of that, 34 of the defendants were juveniles under the age of 18. So juvenile crime is definitely an area of focus that we've taken note of. A couple of preventative things that we're doing in that space. We can't solve a problem simply through enforcement. We need to address that holistically. And one of the things that we do, education on keeping your car locked. One of the things that many of you have heard about on the auto theft front is the Kias and the Hyundais being susceptible to theft due to a software malfunction. The manufacturers have since corrected that, so we want to get information out there that, yes, if you have those older model vehicles, there is a fix for that you can get your vehicle into the dealership and get that addressed with no charge. The other thing that we want to do is preventatively, we have a couple programs here in the 4th District. One is called the Etch and Catch program. So that's not related to auto theft, but it's related to the theft of auto parts. One of the parts that is frequently stolen from vehicles is your catalytic converter. And what the Etch and Catch program does is it's basically a partnership that we have with several dealerships in the area and mechanics. We will be able to install an etching which identifies your catalytic converter as being marked and identified by Montgomery County Police. We'll get that serial number, and then when that criminal is under the vehicle looking, when they see that catalytic converter has been etched, that's a visible deterrent to say, you know what, this is probably not the one to steal, because they know what it is. This is marked, so I can't take this to the pawn shop and melt this down. And I also can't, I'm going to have this serial number tracked, so when we're investigating it, we'll be able to track that part. So it's not a complete fix, but it's something proactively that we can do, so we encourage that. There's a sign up on our website if you'd like to sign up for that. We also have a tile program, and we also have wheel lock devices at the 4th District Station. So on our webpage, you'll see information about those programs, so please go to the 4th District webpage, and there's plenty of information about that. So a couple other points that I want to touch on just on the problem-oriented policing front in our downtown area. One of the things that we've done is we've enhanced police presence there. We already have a central business district team, but we have created some overtime details down there, and we're focusing definitely on the weekend hours. You'll see high visibility officers in our downtown area. Those officers will be on foot as well doing establishment checks. We've also used our staffing, the way that our staffing works, to reorient some officers on what we call overlap days to different high value areas or areas that we're having problems. So right now, every Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, we've got two shifts that are working in one sector. So we can take that secondary shift and put them in a different place where we have a problem. So we try to use that creatively to put officers where the problems are. Our Glenmont Shopping Center is also a problem-oriented policing project for us. One of the locations we were looking at is the McDonald's in that shopping center. We had a very high volume of calls within the past year, and we were taking a look at that. We took a dive into the data. We're seeing some juvenile truancy issues. We're seeing some delinquent acts as a result of that. So we actually had a really good partnership with the McDonald's business there. Our community outreach section went in to identify the problem, what the needs are. We talked with McDonald's risk management. We made some suggestions on some engineering that they can do to simple things like placing mirrors in locations so you don't have blind spots inside the restaurant. So they've been very, very receptive in working in partnership with us, and I think this is a model going forward of how we can engage with businesses and get solutions there. We put additional resources there. We've also used technology to help us in that location. We've put a camera there, which I'll talk about in just a minute, a fixed mount camera that is linked to our new Violent Crime Information Center. And so we've definitely seen a decrease in activity there. And so that's some positive signs. So on a technology front, one of the things that we try to stay ahead of the curve is using technology to be a force multiplier for our officers. Right now in the 4th District, those fixed mount cameras that I just mentioned, we've got 2 of them. We've got one that we put at the McDonald's, and we've got another one that we put down at Wheaton Plaza. The camera down at Wheaton Plaza has been effective for us. There have been a number of significant crimes that we've actually been able to get information on in real time to our officers right away as a result of having that camera down there. And the camera also is designed to be seen. It's got flashing red and blue lights on it, so just the physical piece of the camera itself serving as a deterrent can help us, and it just lets everybody know, hey, the police are here, they're in the area. Hopefully it'll increase the sense of safety there. Those cameras are linked to our Violent Crime Information Center, and what that is that's basically a location that operates out of headquarters. It takes all the camera resources that we have, including those mobile cameras, including cameras on county buildings, and they leverage them as something that we can get information to officers in real time on crimes that are occurring. They also have a number of databases that they're looking at, so they're not driving to and fro. They're not sitting behind a cruiser trying to process so many things. So when a crime goes out, they're listening, they're monitoring on our computer-aided dispatch system, they're getting the information, and then they're able to feed information to our officers there. So the last thing I want to touch on real quick is just a little bit of our community engagement. So these are a couple of photos here, some neat events that we did. The photograph on our right, that is a pop-up barbecue that we did just at the Wheaton Station. Fortunately, we have someone that does barbecue better than I do. His name is Corporal Bacalis. He cooks a good burger, and hot dogs are his specialty too. So if we have one again, feel free to stop by. We'll try to get his barbecue mobile so we can get up here to the Olney area as well. But it was a great day. We set it up right on the sidewalk there. We had a number of people come by and stop in. And these pop-up events are really what we like because we can take that tent, we can take that table, take our resources. We want to get them into the community, get that visibility there, and make it comfortable for people just to come up to us and talk to us. Not everybody's able to join in a meeting like this or feels comfortable in a space like this. So if we can take the community engagement into the community, that's a win. Here in the middle picture, this is a youth camp that we just concluded. So we had a number of teens that came through. It was a 3-day camp where we, exposed them to a lot of what we do as police officers, what that career looks like. We had a lot of fun activities, so really good feedback on that. And then the last one I have over here is an event that we did for Easter egg hunts. And our officers are very good at hiding Easter eggs, but the children were even better at finding them. So it was a great time that we had on Easter. So the last thing I'll leave you guys with for now, just a little bit of information on us. So up here, there's a web link for the Montgomery County Police 4th District webpage. We post on upcoming activities that we have. We have our Montgomery County Police main website here, tremendous amount of information there. For information on crime, Data Montgomery Crime Portal and the Montgomery County Weekly Crime Summaries are 2 excellent resources to kind of keep up to speed on the events that are occurring. We do a really good job of pushing information out there. And also, please follow us on Twitter, our MCP at MCP News and Facebook, and we're also on Nextdoor. Our community services officers and myself try to do a good job of just pushing information out on Nextdoor. It's just another great way we found to communicate. And that is all I have at the moment. Turn it back to Dawn. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, before I continue, I want to let Chair Katz get up and give you a few remarks. So Chair Katz chairs our Public Safety Committee. That's one of the two committees that I serve on the council. I also serve on the Health and Human Services Committee, and I serve as our council's lead for crisis response. There you go.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very, very much for being here. We all appreciate it. I wanted to say to District 7, as well as District 2, if we have I know we have a couple people here because the council members here. Thank you very much for sending both Dawn and Marilyn to the county council. Yes, applaud, please. And while we're in the applauding business, you know, I believe the commander deserves a second round of applause, as do all of his officers. I did want to point out that my chief of staff, who puts up with a lot of foolishness with me, might I add, but my chief of staff, Sharon Lettner, is here, and she's a neighbor as well, from what I understand. And Susan Farag is here, who's an analyst for the public safety. And yeah, you didn't see her before, did you? And she does an absolutely wonderful job for the county council in general. I am the chair of the Public Safety Committee. For a very quick background, I tell people I'm as local and as loco as you can get. I was born in Montgomery County. My mother was born in Gaithersburg, and the family has lived there. My mother's no longer living, but my family has lived in Gaithersburg for over 100 years. I was the mayor for many years and on the city council. And today, the commander and I were chatting about this, but for District 7, though it's not exactly in the Olney side, today we did have the groundbreaking for the 6th District Police Station. It's, if those of you who are familiar with the Gaithersburg area, if you look at the Royal Farms, it's to the left. So we were joking that everybody can go over and get a fried chicken wing whenever they need it, but it actually took 20 years for that to happen. 20 years. You know, thank goodness it was on fast track, but I was mayor and Greg Hassan, who now works for the county as well, we were with the city of Gaithersburg, and we got the land donated for a county site, for a police site. And so it's taken all this time. Not proud of that, but we are proud of the fact that at least it's getting done. So we're working on that. You know, I like to ask people to please tell us their suggestions. Please do not assume that we know what you know. Because maybe we do, but I'd much rather hear it 3 times than no time at all. Now at home, I don't know that I actually like to hear it 3 times and no time at all. But in general, I do. I believe it's necessary. If you have an idea, please don't keep it to yourself. Please don't wait for a forum like this. We all have offices, all the council members have offices, and we have staff that works with us, emails get answered, so please do that. And I did want to say that just this, I guess Monday, the days run together, but Monday, we did do a camera grant program that's in the works, Public Safety and Economic Development Committees, which was 7 people, because the Economic Development Committee has 4 people in it, and Marilyn Balcom is on that. We recommended to the full council that we have a program for people to get cameras for their homes. And we believe that's another tool in the toolbox. We understand that we're never going to stop crime, but if we work together, we can certainly make it so someone doesn't enjoy it. And the other thing is, it's for the first time, I believe, in the history of Montgomery County, we've actually started to give a $20,000 signing bonus to have people become police officers. We never had to do that. There was, you know, being a police officer has never been easy, but it's certainly, probably, if anything, it's more difficult today. but there a lot of in many cases, we have legacies. We have, a father or a grandfather and a grandmother in some cases that are police officers that are now telling their grandkids, I don't know, you can get more money doing something else. You can, it's not as tough a job in some other areas. But we are doing the $20,000 signing bonus. We matched Anne Arundel County, who was having success. We're starting to have more and more success with that. And it's like a signing bonus for the NFL. You don't get the check right that day. It's over time, but we're doing that. We did fully fund the negotiated bargained agreements by the Fraternal Order of Police and all the other unions as well, to make certain that people realize that they're appreciated. We know that they have expenses just like all of us do, and so we're working on those types of things. But let me just, I know that we're going to hear some questions, but let me just remind you, please, we are here because we are here because we are concerned, and we know you are here because you're as concerned as we are. So please keep us together. We can help solve this. Thank you very much, and thank you, Dawn.
So I'm going to apologize in advance. I talk fast, but that's a good thing because I know you all want to ask questions. But I did want to go over and highlight a few things from this year's state legislative session that I think are really incredibly important to a lot of people, and a lot of people have questions or concerns about. So this is sort of a bit of a way of anticipating some of the things that we might be discussing. First off, with respect to firearms or changes related to firearms, we did change one aspect of the state police gun center's role, so that relates to firearms that are surrendered under a final protective order. It goes into effect on October 1st of 2023, and it expands the gun center's role now to include tracking, screening, and vetting of all firearms surrendered under final protective orders. There was already a statewide database that exists, but now it adds these additional factors that will be tracked pursuant to surrender after a final protective order. It includes the number and type of firearms, jurisdiction where they were surrendered, and information on the individual age, jurisdiction of residence, and any other information that the Maryland State Police believe is germane to their work. We also passed, after 4 years of trying, and I say we because I still can't separate myself from my state work, but I am now, it's they. Thank you, Delegate North. Jalen's Law, which is a bill named after Jalen Rose Willie, who was killed at Great Mills High School back in March of 2018. This bill goes into effect on October 1st. It has two parts. One focuses on the safe storage of firearms, and the other focuses on youth suicide prevention. So the youth suicide prevention piece of it requires the Maryland Department of Health to work with the state's Deputy Secretary for Public Health to develop a youth suicide prevention and firearm safe storage guide that'll be published electronically. It'll be put out in places where firearms are sold, and go over all the different requirements of state law for safe firearm storage, and also how to reduce risk associated with harm to minors, because children who are in homes that do have firearms are far more likely to die by suicide by firearm than their peers. The other aspect of it prohibits an individual from storing or leaving a firearm in a location where the person knew or should have known that an unsupervised minor has access to the firearm. And so, there's a lot more pieces to it, but those are the highlights of that one. And then the Gun Safety Act of 2023. That is the one that also goes into effect on October 1st. It exempts law enforcement in the performance of their duties, military personnel, et cetera, and individuals who are carrying under LEOSA. If you know what that acronym means, you understand what I'm saying, and the rest of you probably don't need to know what that means. But it precludes the wearing, carrying, and transporting of a firearm at specific places or on the grounds of, such as kindergartens and preschools. Public schools were already protected by state law, but now this applies to private schools as well, institutions of higher education, healthcare facilities, government or public infrastructure areas, polling places, electrical, gas, or nuclear power plants, or a special purpose area, which is defined as a place where alcohol or cannabis are sold for on-site consumption, stadium, a museum, a racetrack, or a video lottery facility. So that's kind of the highlights of that. I know we are less than 48 hours away from the legalization of cannabis in the state of Maryland. And the state did release some information today that's going to be posted to advise on what you can do, what you can't do, the do's, the don'ts, the who it applies to, who it doesn't apply to. But this definitely still does not allow for cannabis consumption in public, period. It includes a $50 for a first-time offense and $150 for each subsequent offense, and those are civil citations. Hate crimes, because I know that was one of the things that came up earlier. We do have now because we've had such escalating incidents of hate bias and hate crimes across the state of Maryland, and particularly here in Montgomery County, and prosecutorial resources are scarce, so not all cases that might fit the definition of a hate crime end up being prosecuted. This now allows for a civil remedy for individuals for whom were hurt by an act that could constitute a violation of Maryland's hate crimes laws. The victim can now bring a civil action against the perpetrator. Of course, that means there's a different burden of proof because it's a preponderance of evidence for a civil case and clear and convincing for or beyond a reasonable doubt for criminal prosecution. It allows for injunctive relief, economic and non-economic damages, and it also includes an attorney's fees and court cost provision, which is important. On the behavioral health front, there was a bill that passed related to advocacy surrounding mental health advanced directives. That's something that's really important to me. Stay tuned for more from me on that front. But we've had mental health advanced directives for a while. We haven't done a great job of sharing with the public what they are, how they can be used, and how they can help those who do suffer from mental illness, who might stop taking their medications at a particular time, to be able to have their wishes known in the case that they are incapacitated or not able to make their best judgments while they are off their medications, that everyone would know what to do. Medical providers will know what to do, and it streamlines the process and helps carry out the autonomy of the individual with the mental illness. We also, I'm doing it all the time, passed the Home and Community-Based Services for Children and Youth Program Act. That's also effective on October 1st. It creates a program for mental and behavioral health care and stabilization of children and youth in a clinical practice that is home-based, family-centered, and designed to reduce behavioral interruptions and disruptions in the home, school, and community. That will have regulations that come with it, so I don't know how long it'll take for the regulations to be done at the state. That's anybody's guess. But we also had a tweak to the laws that provide for licensure of psychologists. It's not disputed that we do have increased mental and behavioral health needs throughout the United States. We also don't have enough clinicians to go around. And so this is one way to help increase availability of, particularly, and there's some specific provisions in there for Canadian psychologists and those who'd gone through credentialed programs in Canada to be able to work cross-border and get credentialed here as well. On the pedestrian safety front, and the T&E committee did have a hearing today on the bill that Councilmember Glass sponsored, that all of us co-sponsored, on traffic safety, pedestrian safety. At the state level, they require for any pedestrian or bike safety construction improvement projects that the State Department of Transportation is doing and has underway, but going to take more than 12 months to complete. The Department of Transportation will need to implement all possible incremental near-term safety improvements as soon as practicable while keeping the other projects still on schedule. So you're doing what you can in parallel to keep things going. Human trafficking. The state created a safe harbor provision for victims of human trafficking because victims of human trafficking, often children, may be engaged in criminal conduct themselves, but they are engaged in the criminal conduct because they are being trafficked. And you don't want to further victimize those who are being victimized by being trafficked. That goes into effect on October 1st. We had two bills related to elder abuse. One creates a task force to study elder abuse. We know it's underreported. It also includes, elder abuse is not just a physical or neglect type claim, it also includes financial scams and other sordid things. I know when I was with the AG's office in our consumer protection division at the AG's office, they had a lot of complaints specifically related to targeted financial scams affecting our senior population. And the last elder abuse law relates to dealing with unlicensed assisted living programs and what it would take to cure, penalties for failure of those facilities to cooperate, et cetera. So, some of the initiatives that I have been working on since I came to the council. I'm currently working on updating our existing county smoking laws to reflect the legalization of cannabis, because they reference cigarettes and they don't reference cannabis. They don't even reference vaping, to be fair, but they need to be updated and tweaked. I'm working on a bill that creates a statutory establishment of an interdisciplinary crisis intervention team. There is currently a unit within MCPD that works on crisis intervention, and of course our behavioral health partners within the Department of Health and Human Services provide a wide range of services. This is to help formalize and bring those two together. They do work together now, I don't want to imply that they don't, but to help formalize it and solidify it for the future and to grow it, because the needs have grown tremendously. Creation of a voluntary 911 registry, which is for individuals with particular disabilities or medical conditions, or you may have a parent who has dementia or Alzheimer's. Howard County has had a system like this in place since 2012. It was something that I got to work with when I was with the state, and I really loved the program. There's been an effort to try and do it statewide, but while they're still working on how to figure out how to do it statewide, we can do it right here in Montgomery County. We had the committee hearing on the creation of the Air Park Citizens Advisory Commission today, and I am a co-sponsor of the Safe Streets Act that we also had the committee hearing on today, and have been working on an ongoing basis with our county Department of General Services, the county's Department of Transportation, our state delegate team. Thank you, D14. You guys are rock stars. I know Craig Zucker couldn't be here tonight, but we have quite the phone chain going on for roadway and sidewalk improvements. A lot of this particular part of District 7 has sidewalks that start, stop, and then don't pick up on the other side till you're way farther down the road and it's disjointed. And that's a focus to be cured over time. And I have been working hard, and I'm so excited that the Baltimore Banner picked up a letter from the Baltimore City FOP president yesterday on this very same issue. But starting back in April, I have been working with MCPD, with Chief Jones, and with the FOP Lodge 35 President Lee Holland on trying to get the certification for law enforcement officers regulations by the Maryland Police Standards Training Commission adjusted, because right now they can't certify anyone who has used cannabis within a certain amount of time, or in sometimes if they used it more than a certain number of times ever, which in light of the fact that cannabis is now legalized in 36 hours, and it's been legal for medical use for years, has really put a strain on the recruiting. It would not in any way change the fact that you could have for-cause drug testing at work. That's the same with alcohol. If someone comes to work for their shift and something's not quite right, you can go ahead and force them to be tested. The same would apply here. And the state had actually changed the law and specifically put in statute effective last July 1st, that you cannot refuse to certify an officer for that, and yet they have refused to change the regulations. So there's a lot of pressure on that. I know it's on the agenda for the Police Standards Training Commission's July 12th meeting, and I'm hoping we get to have some traction on that. So, 2018, after the shooting at Parkland, Florida, and before our own incident here at Great Mills High School in St. Mary's County, both the then governor's administration and multiple state senators had put in bills to deal with school safety. Prior to that time, the Maryland Center for School Safety did exist. It was very tiny. It was literally one person plus a contractual employee. But the Safe to Learn Act of 2018, which was born out of those two tragedies, was for the first time when what an SRO is was defined in state law. SROs, however, have been around for a very long time. And so an SRO is a law enforcement officer who has been assigned to a school in accordance with a memorandum of understanding between the chief law enforcement agency and the local education agency. It also defined a different type of employee that we do have, school security employees, which are employees of the school system. So MCPS has many school security employees who work throughout our schools across the school system. Those are not school resource officers. They are not law enforcement officers. They do not follow that chain of command. Their chain of command is to the principal in the building in which they serve. And the roles of a school resource officer are as an informal counselor or mentor, educator, law enforcement, and emergency responder. Everyone, whether you're a school resource officer or a school security employee, has to take the state's mandated training. That training was developed back then when the law passed, and everyone had to be trained in that before starting work in the schools effective September 1st, 2019. That was the first school year where that applied, and that was the year that the school year got cut short due to the pandemic. So we didn't really have a full school year to see how things worked post all that standardized training for both SROs and school security at the same time. I believe my team in the back has a printout, if you'd like to take one, that shows you exactly what is covered, not the actual slide decks because it's a 70-hour curriculum, but the subject matter that are covered in that training program. And there were specific parts of it that were mandated in state law and others that when we built it, because at the time that was one of my roles at the state, was built with stakeholder feedback to decide what was most useful for folks to be learning who were going to be working inside the schools. There was also a requirement that the state issue a guidance document that local school systems and should use in conjunction with their local law enforcement departments to determine whether they should have an SRO assigned to the building or whether what is called adequate law enforcement coverage would suffice. These are the things that should be considered by the school systems in figuring out whether they need an SRO or whether adequate law enforcement coverage would work. And of course, staffing issues for law enforcement were an issue. At the time the bill was passed, there were those who said, why can't we have one in every school in the state? And we said, because we don't have enough officers to go around. And that was in 2018. And we also, in that bill, wrote that all school systems had to have a behavioral threat assessment team, and there must be a person on that team who has law enforcement expertise. So I wanted to give you a snapshot of some of the data. Ever since the kids came back into the buildings, it's been challenging, behaviorally challenging. And I say that as a parent of 4 kids. And I have 2 that are heading into 10th grade, 1 heading into 9th grade, 1 heading into 6th grade, and I finally no longer have 3 bus drop-offs and 3 pickups. But, you know, at each level, there were different things, and at each age, as developmentally appropriate, certain boundaries are tested, right? But that has gone on and persisted, and I believe that's why we see some of the things we're seeing in the community offenses, community-based offenses, where we have increased juvenile involvement. With that, that's my overview. We'd like you to send us any questions that you want us to answer.
How short are you of officers from your normal complement, and what are your and what is not being done because of that?
Overall, within the department at any given time, it's been about 126 to 140 short, depending on who's come on and who's retired across all of the 6 police districts. But
Sure. Well, thank you for that question. It's a good question. And yes, like was just mentioned, about 126 to 140 is where we're at currently. So one of the things we constantly look at when I was director of police personnel is we look at our anticipated attrition. We looked at trends moving forward, and recruiting is a very heavy focus of what we're trying to do right now. Is bring on our next workforce to really make sure that we can maintain staffing and maintain all the things that we need to do. Currently, in the 4th District, what we've done is we've simply looked at ways we can prioritize resources, and we've been pretty successful in doing that. Our crime analysts help us out tremendously when we're talking about issues of crime, really pointing us to where the areas that resources need to be. We use overtime resources to make sure that when we don't have the staffing or as much staffing as we'd like to apply to a problem, we can bring back officers on an overtime basis to assist with that. We move resources around from time to time to meet needs where they occur. But staffing and our anticipated shortages are one of our biggest challenges. We're not unique in that. Just about every police department in the region is experiencing similar challenges with that, and it's a pretty heavy focus. It's also what makes recruiting challenging is because it's a very competitive environment with other agencies. But I think we've done a lot of good things. There's a lot of positive momentum on the recruiting front. Like was mentioned before by Councilman Katz, the $20,000 hiring bonus, that's the first time we've ever had something like that. And so I think because we just instituted that, we've already seen an increase in our applications that are coming through, which is good news. We hope to continue that momentum. We also implemented a number of new strategies in recruiting that I'll touch on real quick. So one of them is the decentralized recruiter program. And so we have a central recruiting team of several officers and a supervisor, but now we've expanded that to invite officers out in the field across a variety of disciplines to participate as recruiters. So we bring them in, we give them training, and then we'll actually send those officers out to a variety of recruiting events. We will use those officers as mentor officers to individuals who are actually in the hiring process, and that's been very successful because now we can pair one-on-one an applicant with a mentor officer who's in the field. And those mentor officers and these decentralized recruiters do things like take the applicants on ride-alongs. They'll go have a cup of coffee with them and really have those down-to-earth conversations to share what being a police officer is like. The other thing that we have in the recruiting space I think is unique to Montgomery County Police. We have a pre-hire program. So what that is that for applicants in the process, we want to expose them to what life is like as a police officer, what some of the requirements are. So we'll bring those folks into our academy several times a week. We'll bring them in via Zoom, and we'll also have workout sessions with them as well. And what we're able to do is we're able to get them information on what they can expect as a police officer, what the physical demands are, what the mental demands are. We'll get some techniques to them on how to mitigate some of those things, teach them how to eat, teach them some kinesiology and things on body mechanics. So when they get into the academy as an applicant, they're already prepared mentally and physically. We'll start working them out. So during that 4 or 6 months while they're waiting for the police academy, we can be building that potential candidate. We will give them information on law. We will have speakers come in and meet with them, again, through various disciplines in the department to tell them what the job's actually like. There's a lot of other specialties that you can do in the Montgomery County Police Officer outside of just a patrol officer. So we want to help them envision them in that role and have those conversations and be transparent about that. We have at our police academy, what we're doing now is at least once a month, we're bringing potential applicants into our training academy space. And we have a state-of-the-art training academy. And I actually just got back for some training out of state where, I was able to meet with law enforcement leaders across the country. And we really do have a state-of-the-art academy when it compares to some other agencies. We have our own driving track. We have our own large-scale cityscape where we can actually teach folks how to properly enter a room safely when they're searching for someone, how to effectively drive in various conditions. We have state-of-the-art firearms training facilities, both indoor and outdoor. So we'll bring people in, we'll expose them to the instructors, we'll expose them to the training facility and show them what that looks like. And that's just for the people that are even just considering becoming a police officer. So I think the combination of strategies that we are applying, I think we're going to have some success. We're going to keep that momentum going because that's our biggest priority area so that we can build our force and build the force of the future. We have a very proud history in the Montgomery County Police Department, and the only way that we are able to maintain that is hiring the best and the brightest, and so that's a big focus for us.
80% of traffic stops for cannabis odor find illegal guns. Illegal guns and drugs are confiscated from minor traffic stops. Please comment on the STEP bill. Well, the odor piece is a separate issue. That's a state issue because there was a state bill that passed, and which is, you know, without getting in the weeds of the Fourth Amendment and traditional probable cause and what have you, problematic in that you can't smoke cannabis while you're driving a car either. So there's a lot of hairs to be split over the way House Bill 1071 ended up passing at the 11th hour on the last day of the legislative session. You know, had that not gone in there, I do think it would have ended up going up to the state Supreme Court for decision making. I think it still will end up because there will be some fact pattern that generates a discussion about this, and that is problematic. The STEP bill didn't really deal with cannabis specifically. You know, certainly if you have probable cause to believe that someone is driving under the influence, you can still stop them no matter what. It's a question of once the window rolls down and you are determining what it was, you have to have the chicken before the egg, if you will, be able to articulate the observing of the impaired driving. That is the reason you're initiating the stop, not for the smell of cannabis, because you're probably not smelling it if they're driving by you and you're observing impaired driving behavior. The STEP Act, the council ended up having a letter go to the Attorney General's office to ask for an opinion or advice related to whether this area of legislation is preempted by state law, and they are still waiting for that response. So that's maybe. Yes, I know. They said they might have it by August. We can place bets. Yeah. The county is aligned with SSJC to decrease the presence of police in our communities. What does that mean in reality? Decrease by how many? What is the threshold? So we didn't cut any police positions, we added them. So I'm not really sure what that means, but during the budget season, you know, certainly staffing was an issue. And while we were talking, broadly speaking, at the budget session about unfilled vacancies, there was no unfilled vacancy that was going to get touched in the police department, in our emergency call centers, in our behavioral health space, right? There may have been jobs in other places that have been unfilled for years that are more administrative, that aren't front-facing and aren't delivering those types of services, but there was no cut to fire, EMS, any of our public safety complement of positions. What are some ideas for programs to add to next year's budget to decrease youth crime? Well, that is a great thing. We have a bunch of different issues. One, certain parts of our county don't have as many recreational facilities or programs available for youth. So every year, school lets out, the weather gets hotter, crime rate goes up. Sometimes during the regular year, if we don't have a particularly bad winter, the crime rate never really dips. It kind of stays and then spikes when it gets super hot. That is a forever thing. That is not unique to the post-pandemic world. That has always been a thing. What's more applicable now is that it is happening involving children more often. So I do think we need to take a good look at how we are engaging youth and keeping them engaged throughout the summer, or even with certain programs like, you know, the 3rd District does a basketball program that I got to go to and hang out with them, where the officers do a thing every Friday night for 4 weeks. And then the question is, well, where do they go next after that? They did this program, but what's the next thing for them to get to? So finding ways for them to collaborate with our regional services centers, our parks and rec, and make sure we have positive handoffs. Linda, your phone closed, but that's okay. I think one of the questions was about the PAC. And we did have the committee hearing for that. It was scheduled for Monday. We went in, and the bill, we had a lot of amendments to the bill. I alluded to this earlier. And so The reason I wrote it the way I did to end and be an emergency bill to end July 31st was because that's when the terms of the members were to expire. And I thought then we could have a longer runway to figure out what should we have that creates a space in place for this kind of conversation. And also the prior legislation was centered around 9 council members, not 11. We've talked about transparency issues with the council since this new council came on board. And so rather than having each council member pick their person to be on here, we want to have the council pick all of the resident members who will be on there. And in the prior iteration, or what is existing currently, there is a member from MCPD executive leadership, and there is a member of the FOP, but they are not permitted to vote. And that's a deal breaker for me. I don't believe you're having positive conversations about how citizens can talk through, the current landscape of policing, and if you're not allowing your police partners to speak or to vote on the issues that are being discussed. At the same time, since the PAC was created prior to the state's Police Accountability Act, prior to the changes that went into effect there with the creation of the police accountability boards that each county must have and we have, and the administrative charging commissions, there's been confusion about what the role of the PAC even is, and to be fair, some of the members seem confused. So this is a way to say very clearly moving forward, this is the space for this conversation and having these conversations and providing feedback, but your job is not police accountability. There is an entity that is required by state law to do that, and the county passed that legislation, and that body exists. Same with the administrative charging commissions, and we want to make sure that the public knows very clearly who they are supposed to go to if there is a cause for concern. Yes.
Commander, what's the latest on tracking down the sale of fentanyl and other deadly drugs? I noticed that wasn't listed on your offenses, and I think that's the most serious offense going in this community right now.
Yes, sir. That's a great question. So I can give you a little background about how we handle those cases. So, narcotics investigations, we have a division that really oversees those as it pertains to the sale, the distribution, the manufacture, and that's our special investigations division. So, fentanyl is something that we're seeing a significant increase in the community, and one that we have to combat. We have to combat it on several fronts. We have to combat it like any other problem through education, being a heavy front, and also identifying the sources of those people that are bringing that into the community. So whenever we have an overdose case, one of the things that happens is our Special Investigations Division is notified, and they send a detective out to that scene, out to the hospital, wherever it may be, and they're going to gather evidence on that particular case, and they're going to start working the case to try to work that back to where the source of that came from. So that's something that I believe is very unique to how Montgomery County handles those investigations, and it shows the seriousness that we take those things with. The other thing that we do is in each district, and I'll talk about 4D in particular, we have our district community action team and our special assignment team. So when we have drug complaints, when we see pockets of those activities, when we identify individuals that we know are dealing drugs, we go ahead and use those resources to start those investigations. Right now, we have some challenges in our central business district area, but I'm very grateful to have teams with the skill that they do, because it's very rare that I give them an assignment and that they don't provide some immediate impact in those areas. Just to give you an example, just last night, my district community action team went out, and as a result of a pocket of drug activity which we were looking at, they had someone in custody in a very short period of time, recovered a privately manufactured firearm, as well as a quantity of fentanyl. And in these drug investigations, it doesn't merely stop at the arrest. When we deal with an individual that's involved in a sale of drugs, we do follow-on activities. We have several investigative means to take that from the source and try to carry that back as far as it can. So it is a significant problem, but from the enforcement side of that, we have a robust response to that. We also want to make sure that we're addressing it through education. So we have something called the COPE trailer, And that's a trailer that you'll see in a community. We take it out at several different major events. And if you haven't seen it before, it's a great resource. It's a trailer that's basically set up like a youth bedroom. And we have a number of things, and I won't give too much detail on what's in there because I want people to actually go and experience it themselves. But we'll have a trained police officer walk a parent through what that actually looks like, what's inside, what to look for when you're dealing with a youth, a loved one, a family member, to make sure that we're not missing the signs of drug addiction, drug use, drug overdose. So that's a resource that we put out in the community. We also, when we identify someone who's dealing with substance abuse issues, we have a program in the county called STEER. And that's another program that can get folks resources to address their substance abuse problems. So we try to address it as holistically as we can. It is a problem, but we're working hard to do what we can from a law enforcement side to impact that.
Sometimes when the evidence that they're extracting may be related to another investigation that's already underway, and there is a coordinated system for state, federal, and local law enforcement to deconflict on that. And there is collaboration and cooperation on that. So it is a far more complex thing, especially when you're talking about drugs that are moving through high traffic areas. And I-95 is, and 70, et cetera, 270. So we are right in the heart of that traffic pattern.
And I just wanted to quickly mention that if someone overdoses and someone else calls, or police, calls 911, that person is not arrested. We would much rather have that person live than arrest that person. They have other issues other days with them, but Narcan has saved many, many lives, and we touched on this on Tuesday. We had the public health officer's update, and part of what we are knowing is that we have some mostly young people, who have had to call, that someone has had to call 911 for them 2 and 3 times a week. But so we want to save their life, we do, but then we have to figure out from there how we're going to save their life in a different way as well.
Back to the SRO issue. So the decision of whether to have SROs is not something that the council can legislatively mandate, because that's not how the law reads. It is a decision that is left to the school board, essentially, because the school board is the governing body of the local school system. And the way the state law reads, it says that that is to be decided by the local school system in coordination with their local law enforcement partners. So they're supposed to be taking into consideration the advice of those who are dealing with these public safety issues on a day in, day out basis. And as you noted on the slide I had there earlier, it talked about number of calls for service to a school, as well as calls for service in and around the school community. Those are both factors that lend heavily toward a need for having SROs back in the building and reducing the time to response. How does your state work inform you on the council? Oh, well, that's a great one. So during my time at the state, I worked in a bunch of different content areas. So the actual entities that I was assigned to council and I was the sole legal advisor for were the Maryland Center for School Safety, the Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center, which is a education and workforce policy analytics entity that informs public policy on education and workforce development, the state's active assailant interdisciplinary work group, the Food Systems Resiliency Council, and I was on loan to the Maryland Department of Emergency Management and the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical System Services. So those are the big bucket items. I worked on special projects related to mental and behavioral health on the Governor's Commission for to study mental and behavioral health on its Youth and Family Subcommittee. I worked on a special project for the State Behavioral Health Administration on involuntary commitments and emergency petitions and the dangerousness standard. So those are just some highlights. I worked a lot on incidents related to mass violence, prevention and response there too. And my home agency was the Office of the Attorney General, but I was not housed at the Office of the Attorney General. So the place that I worked at is called the Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center. and it is a state and federal law enforcement fusion center, so it is jointly run by the Maryland State Police and FBI Baltimore. After 9/11, these fusion centers were created around the country. Maryland's was the first one to come online. So I hope that answered that question. Cannabis odors as a nuisance and impaired driving. So the standards for driving under the influence haven't changed. We've had driving under the influence subject to cannabis use already. My expectation is that we will have a spike of more of it happening, particularly if people are using edibles and they consume too many because they're confused about why it didn't work right away, and it's the whole thing. So I would expect that to happen. And cannabis odor as a nuisance, as I stated earlier, I'm working on helping to update our local laws to make sure that those that apply to cigarette smoke also apply to cannabis. But the state guidance that has come out has made it abundantly clear, and there are citations, you cannot smoke cannabis and consume cannabis in public, period. Yes, Dr. Stoddard. Yep. Come on up.
So one thing we've been trying to make people clear on with the odor of cannabis, you will 100% see an increase in odor of cannabis across the community. If you have a complaint, call 311 or the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. Please do not call 911. Right. We had a whole list of crimes we want them to be focusing on, and adjudicating between the odor of cannabis in one neighbor versus one neighbor is not the space we want them in, because there's a lot of other more important things they need to be working on. So the county is aware of this. Please call 311 for those complaints, and the Department of Housing and Community Affairs will work with you around the citation issues if necessary. So just want to. Yeah,
and if you have an HOA, if you have a common ownership community, and the state made it abundantly clear in its guidance out to everybody, you can be stricter about those. So, you can, your HOA, your condo association, what have you, can invoke stricter rules. There was a case that was, I think it went to trial maybe early spring or late winter in the District of Columbia, where this was an issue. I know it was covered in the Washington Post, so some of you may have read the article, where it was filed under a nuisance theory for exactly that reason, because the woman in her own unit could not escape the smoke that was happening from next door. That happened and used to happen, many moons ago with cigarettes too in apartment buildings. I remember myself having to put towels down under a door because I didn't want it coming in my apartment, in one of the apartments I lived in Philadelphia. And I spent my time between college and law school working for the Tobacco Products Liability Project up in Boston, back when laws were all first changing regarding cigarette smoking, when we used to have this side of the diner is smoking and this side of the diner is non-smoking, which was totally absurd. That was way back then. And if I explain that to my kids now, they look at me like I'm nuts, and also they ask me, how did you go to law school without a laptop? We had paper and pens. What is being done to address gun violence in Montgomery Village, Gaithersburg, and Germantown? Well, I think Councilmember Balcom and I have had some heart-to-hearts about this. This is a very complex issue. A lot of what we're seeing is targeted violence. It is not random. We do have a gang unit within MCPD. We have a specialized violent crimes and gang unit in the federal level that has operations here in Montgomery County. The place I used to work has its own gang intelligence analyst unit in it that works and supports work all over the state with local law enforcement, the state police, and our federal partners. It's just gotten extremely intense. I know there was something that came out about, the hate crime that was committed yesterday about burning of flags attached to a home. And it was awful, and the term was outraged. And sure, I'm outraged, but I'm outraged about all of this, all of it, period. As a taxpayer, as a mother, I want all of this to be handled, and I want it all to be handled and dealt with, and everyone prosecuted to the fullest extent. Things are out of hand. I am firmly supportive of everything. I mean, I went to bat for the Violent Crimes Information Center. Even if nobody else knew what that acronym was, I was going to make sure my colleagues knew what that acronym was, because we need that. That provides valuable real-time intelligence to our officers. That makes a huge difference in the field. So I'm firmly committed to supporting those efforts across the board toward working collaboratively with all of our public safety partners to make sure we're doing the best job we can, and to making sure we're engaged with community stakeholders to understand where these things are happening. At the end of the day, the best thing we can do is to truly, if you're seeing something, say something. There's not really anything that's too insignificant to go, you know, my gut's telling me. If your gut's telling you, say something to somebody.
I'm a retired school teacher, but I still coach and substitute at the high school I taught at my whole career. And so I'm kind of in tune with what's going on in the schools. And when you're talking about youth crime, one of the big issues in Montgomery County Public Schools is truancy. Mm-hmm. And I realize we have the county council, we have the Board of Education. What type of dialogue is going on, if any, between those to deal with the issue of truancy? Because my gut's telling me, and you told me, listen to my gut, that when a child is truant, particularly a teen, they've got a lot of free time and they could be up to criminal activity. I know we see spikes during the summer. I think we probably saw spikes, maybe we can get some data during the school year, but some of these schools, I won't name any in particular, but there's one that has a 50% truancy rate.
Yes.
That's absurd. Yes. So I'm just curious, is there a dialogue going on between the county council and the BOE dealing with this issue of truancy?
So I can only speak for my own conversations on that front, but I have spoken with both Dr. McKnight and with members of the MCPS leadership, specifically those who deal with school safety issues, about this. When the kids came back after virtual learning, the open lunch concept came to be. And, you know, it's great to have a policy to say we're going to do this thing. If you don't have the people to carry it out, and there are problems, and in one particular instance with one school where there was an overdose that happened in an adjacent business, the principal of that school said, we're going to start enforcing the policies. And I'm like, it's March. You know, if I tell a kid, this is the rule, this is the consequence, you know, and maybe the first time yet you're like, okay, we're going to work with you on how to do this, but they have to know you mean it. If you've gone through, you know, 3/4 of the school year and you haven't been enforcing your policies, they don't care. So I have raised this issue. The chronic absenteeism number is readily available for any of our schools on the mdreportcard.org. I strongly urged that they should set a threshold where if you are under, if your chronic absenteeism number is at a certain rate, then you shouldn't have open lunch, because that's when we're having kids elope from the campuses. That's when we're having, and I know this was on your on the slide I showed for calls for service to schools. There's a lot of car accidents that happen right near the school because they left the school and they weren't supposed to leave the school, and they took the car and they're trying to get back, and then they have a car accident right in front of the school. So that is something that I have been working on addressing.
And I just wanted to point out that there is a truancy court in Montgomery County. I guess you were there too with me for the graduation. And it really is pretty remarkable. The state's attorney has people, and I think they're in every elementary, I believe, and every middle school, and they, for the first time, they went to a high school. I mean, every step is a different issue that you're dealing with. But it really has turned some young people around, and they get great applause, and they get a certificate, and so it really is positive reinforcement. But that's a program that the state's attorney is doing.
I have been following the public safety saga for 3 years, and what I've been seeing is much different from what is being portrayed here. What I saw is 3 years ago, something happened in another part of the country, and a broad brush was painted on our police department, which by all accounts that I've heard is one of the best departments in the country. And I was at a meeting last night of the Reimagining Task Force report, and my mind was blown because there were 800 recommendations that were made from 3 different organizations that the police had to implement. And I'm thinking, how are there 800 recommendations that have to be made for one of the best departments in the country? And what I've also seen is activists who have gotten very involved, and the county has aligned. That was my question about aligning with them, and their mission is to decrease the presence of police in our communities. So it's clear to me that they've been involved with everything. They practically had a seat on the council. This was before you were there. And they have a say in everything. And they don't represent me, but the county seems to think that they are representative of the county. And in fact, Craig Rice even said that it frustrates him when people speak on behalf of communities that they are not a part of.
Right.
Before 3 years ago, this was a competitive market for recruits. It was, people wanted to be here. The pay was insultingly low, but cops wanted to work here because of the reputation. And now what I'm hearing is cops don't want to work here. I'm hearing the ones at the top, the older ones are getting out as soon as they can. They would have otherwise have stayed on. Veteran cops who have a lot of experience, who might have stayed on, are getting out as soon as they possibly can. You have to offer $20,000 now because nobody wants to come here. And the ones in the middle who have too much invested to leave are the ones bearing the brunt, who are short-staffed, who are working overtime, who are working for a county that shows, not only doesn't show support, but shows disdain for them. So when they have to make their stops, I imagine that there are some people who will say, who are stopped and will say, all I have to do is make a little trouble here, video you, you'll come before the PAC, the PAB, the ACC, who are stacked, let's be honest, are stacked with activists, or activists have a say in everything they do. And the PAC, that was my question. The PAC did not produce an annual report.
Right. Yeah, it
The
didn't.
PAC had a traffic enforcement forum, but they issued their report before the forum. They've had a revolving door of members. It is not a healthy organization. And I think criminals know that there aren't as many cops out, and I think they know that there's not much the cops can do. And so that's my spiel.
For Commander, soup to nuts, how long does it take to get an officer recruited through the academy, work with his FTO, and work patrol on his, her, their own?
Sure. So I would say right now the process for recruiting from day one when you submit your application to the day that you sit in the academy can range from anywhere from 3 to 6 months. We've taken steps to try to expedite that process because, again, we're competing with other agencies to get that applicant. Once they're in the academy, it's a 6-month period of training, and then field training thereafter is a minimum of 14 weeks, and sometimes that time period is extended just to make sure that they're ready and they can meet all the demands that that program requires. So I would say really you're looking at about a year to a year and a half. A year and a half really is where you're looking at for the time that the officer applies to the time that they're a solo officer on the street.
That's a long time to fill those gaps. I'm going to rapid fire a couple more.
The other thing that I want to mention real quick, we do have a process for lateral hires right now. And that's actually, I think we're really excited about that because we're actively recruiting officers that are already sworn, both in the state of Maryland, and we recently changed the process through comparative compliance. We can now go outside of just the state of Maryland, but we're actively recruiting and bringing on folks from out of state who meet the Maryland Police Training Commission standards for law enforcement officer. We'll bring them into the academy. They have a very abbreviated experience, both in the training academy and the field training program. So we've actually got one in my district right now that's actually in field training now, but he came through that program. So we're looking to expand that also.
Once they're in the academy, they get paid.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And we also do something called the early hire program. So what we do is say, for example, our academy doesn't start till January. We're taking applications now. We're moving those folks through expeditiously. And if they complete all of their background and all the hiring elements that they need to, we will actually bring them on as an early hire. We'll start paying them their full salary. We'll put them out into an assignment in the field where they can learn, watch, observe. We put them through that pre-hire program so they can collect the full salary as a police officer candidate very quickly. So we want to do that so we're not losing those applicants while they're waiting for that academy to open up. So that's just a couple things we do.
And a couple quick on cannabis, since it's coming up. Everybody pretty much knows what the standard is for impairment with alcohol. What is it with cannabis? I read some things that there's a field test, and then if you think there's an issue, then you go to a medical facility or something. But is there like a number? Is there something?
Like the .08?
Correct.
Right.
Is there a standard? And then the other thing, are you ready for Saturday with the increases? I was watching the news and they said some dispensaries are saying they plan on being packed, they plan on being crowded, and that's a lot of cash coming in and moving.
Yeah, I can speak to that just briefly. So when we're talking about driving under the influence of either alcohol or drugs, fortunately, that's not something that's new to our officers. Anytime that there is a suspicion of driving under the influence or driving while impaired, that officer is going to administer a standardized battery of field sobriety tests that are applicable to both alcohol and drugs. Depending on what they're seeing in those indicators, they'll make an arrest determination at that point. And then we have officers that are trained as drug recognition experts that we bring to bear in those circumstances, and they have extensive training at the county and state level, and they will be able to make those further decisions on that specific impairment as far as to a specific substance like cannabis or anything else. And then there are provisions in law that under the Maryland Code that require certain testing, and there are penalties for if you refuse a drug recognition test that's ordered by a drug recognition expert. So we are ready. That's obviously something new, so we're going to see what the impact of it is, but our officers will be out there enforcing those laws for sure.
All right. You can sign up for our newsletter. We try to put those out regularly to keep folks abreast of different things happening in and around the county and relevant to the legislation that we're working on and community issues. So thank you for coming out tonight.